When I was little, around 8 years old, I was on vacation with my parents and little sister in Montego Bay, Jamaica. After a long day of exploring the island, I believe we climbed the waterfall and visited a market that day. We were all going to spend the evening on the beach by the resort. My parents swam around a bit and eventually went back to the sand to lay down and talk or read. Meanwhile, my sister, around 5 at the time, and I were building sandcastles at the edge of the water, where the wet sand was the perfect consistency for some sculpting. We sat there for hours, presumably. I remember the castle originally started off as a competition to see who could build a sand mountain the fastest, but afterwards we just started connecting the mountains with sand and just adding to the castle like kids do. We added moats, tiny bridges, flags made from leaves. Just about what you'd expect from a sandcastle, and honestly, it ended up being a pretty nice castle for a pair of kids. Anyways, my mom approached us and complimented the castle, taking a few pictures before telling us that we should head back to the resort now for food. Me and my sister immediately complained and whined because we were pretty spoiled at the time. So she eventually agreed to go find food with my dad at one of the nearby restaurants instead, and bring it back to us, which is something they do a lot. In turn, we promised to stay out of the water and not move from where we were playing. A few minutes after she left, a man walked up to us. He was probably around 40 years old and had a bit of a beard and no shirt, but honestly he just looked like a tourist to us. He watched us for about 30 seconds before saying, "Hey kids, it's a pretty cool castle." I immediately thanked him to be polite and went back to the bridge I was trying to build, which kept collapsing from the small waves. "What are you doing there?" he asked. I was pretty annoyed because I was clearly busy, but also a little excited about the attention my masterpiece was getting. "I'm trying to build this bridge, but it won't work. And this part is supposed to have SpongeBob's face on it." It did not remotely resemble SpongeBob, looking back at it. "But I can't figure out how to do the nose yet because the sand won't stay up." Meanwhile, my sister sat there casually scooping sand onto the castle, not really paying any attention to him. "Well, maybe when you guys are done, you can help me and my friends build one of these. We're over there," he said before gesturing behind him. I remember looking and not seeing anyone that seemed to be with him. The idea of an adult liking my castle made me feel really validated, so I didn't notice the oddness of the situation. Regardless, I agreed, but told him that he'd have to wait until I finished my own castle before we could help him. He seemed pretty annoyed by that, but agreed. 5 minutes later, he came back up to us and said, "Hey, my friends and I will have to go soon, so you guys need to hurry up and come with us so we can build it." My sister just said, "Wait, I didn't finish this yet," and he got kind of angry looking. Just at that moment, a younger woman, I'm guessing 25, jogged over from the other side, leaving her boyfriend or brother or whatever. She asked us, "Hey guys, how's it going?" At this point, I was pretty excited and just started explaining to her all of the things I was doing with my castle, pumped by the idea of multiple adults liking my work. She kept talking to me and my sister about the castle and complimenting everything about it, and kept staring at the man without acknowledging him at all. He looked really angry and said, "Fine, I'll just go build it by myself," and stomped away. He didn't walk to any group of people, he just left the beach. The girl kept making small talk with us until the man was gone. And then she said bye and returned to her boyfriend or whatever. And I completely forgot about her. When my mom came back, I told her about how so many people thought the castle was really cool. And she just congratulated me and took some more pictures of it. And gave me a small talk about not talking to strangers. For all I know, that man could have just wanted to build a castle or something. And maybe that girl just came over because she actually appreciated the quality of that amazing sandcastle. Nonetheless, creepy beach guy, let's not meet. This happened to me about a year ago, and I had the thought to share it with you guys after spending a long time on this sub. It was around March, April last year when this happened. I'd been at a friend's party about an hour away from my house, and I was on my way back the following morning. To get to my house, I had to take a bus from said friend's place where the party was held, ride for about 50 minutes, and then transfer buses for the short remaining 10 minutes to reach the stop near my house. My house would then be a short 5-minute walk from there. I wake up Sunday morning around 7 feeling sluggish and tired, but eventually me and my equally sluggish friend catch the only bus to the main city on time, and the ride there is pretty uneventful. We arrive at a silent and empty bus central, and we're the only people there at this moment. It is now around 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning, given why almost no one is out. We quickly eat some the day after McDonald's, and she catches her train home, leaving me on the empty bus central. My bus doesn't leave until 8:35, and although it's broad daylight, I feel unnerved as soon as she gets on the train. I'm by no means a tough or brave person. I'm 5'6", very afraid of the dark, ghosts, strangers, and other similar things. So I play this off as the regular old anxiety and sit down in one of the waiting booths, pull out my phone, and begin the 30+ minute wait. It has probably been not even 10 minutes when something catches my attention in the corner of my eye. I look up, and I see a man walking towards me. The unnerving feeling I had earlier instantly comes back. He's wearing a big winter coat, not a trench coat, mind you, which was odd since it was late spring. But I thought nothing about it at the moment. He's coming closer to where I'm seated, and I remember desperately hoping he wouldn't sit down next to me. He does. And the unnerving feeling I had earlier intensifies. But I have nowhere to go. I have to stay seated next to this man who is by now sitting uncomfortably close to me. The thing that made the entire encounter so much creepier was that he did not seem drunk, high, or mentally unstable at all. He seemed incredibly calm and collected, and that's what scared me the most. He starts initiating conversation, first asking simple things like how I was, until he got more persistent, asking me where I was from and where I was going, where I had been for me to end up here. He asks if I had been on a road gig, and I tell him I don't play music, until he gets even closer and says it means the same as one night stand. I'm really uncomfortable by now, and my gut is telling me to haul ass, but I'm trapped. I try to keep my head cool and answer his questions, making polite conversation and steering the subject away from me and where I'm heading. At one point, I take up my phone, thinking I'll message a friend to pick me up. But as soon as I do, the man is almost over my shoulder, commenting on my beautiful background pic, a selfie of me and my friend, and makes a joke about how he wouldn't mind having me over for dinner. It is now 8:26. I distinctly remember the number when he made the comment. And I'm just praying for time to move quick. I remember thinking that if the bus does not come soon enough, I'll be dead. This man is going to take me away and murder me. The bus central is still empty except for the two of us, and he offers me a breath mint from a small metal jar in his pocket. I try to nicely decline, even though I'm screaming bloody murder in my head. He tries offering a hard candy, and I say that I don't eat sweets. He says, "Sure you don't. A sweet girl like you don't need 'em." All I think about now is that if the bus doesn't arrive soon, I'm screwed. The bus central is still as empty as can be, and in my panicking mind I remember thinking that I need to distract him long enough for the bus to arrive, and then I'm safe. I tried to keep my cool and keep conversation going, and as if someone heard my terrified prayers, the bus arrives a few minutes early. I get up, and I know I could start crying at any given moment, seeing the bus driver and other people in the bus. The man gets up as well, and says that it's fortunate we're catching the same bus. He asks me where my bus stop is, and I blurt one out I know is several kilometers from me. Seeing the bus driver's face calms me, and I let the man go on first, trying to think of what to do next and how to get away from this man. When it's my turn to pay, I lean in and whisper to the driver if he can pull in at my stop without me pushing the button. I think he must have seen how scared I was because he nods. There's an elderly woman on the bus with her dog, and another guy in the far back. So my nerves calm down quite a bit, and I take the aisle seat next to the woman. The man is now playing with the woman's dog, and she is looking incredibly uncomfortable, but doesn't seem to stop the man. I make eye contact with her, and we both realize that something is wrong with this man. My stop comes up, and the man is seated across from me, playing with the woman's dog. The door's open, and the man is looking at me right as I'm about to leave, and I'm thinking that if I leave now, he leaves with me. The elderly woman with the dog must have realized something because she initiates conversation with him, and the dog grabs his attention for only a few seconds. I bolt for the doors, and the bus driver closes them immediately after me. I hear him yelling at the bus driver as I run the fastest I have ever ran and make it to my house in almost no time. I haven't seen the man since, and I don't know if he ever posed an actual threat to me. But I have never been that scared of a stranger in my life. I truly owe it to the bus driver and the elderly lady on the bus. Otherwise, I am certain he would have gotten off the bus with me. When I was 8 to 9 years old, we got a West Highland Terrier puppy called Maggie. I'd always wanted a dog, so was ecstatic when we finally got one. I lived in the perfect area to take her for walks as well. Some suburbs in the north of England, a small farming town surrounded by fields and woods. My best friend at the time was a boy called Mitch. He was the same age and lived 5 streets up. We would hang out most days. Well, one day me and Mitch decided to take Maggie out for a walk on one of the fields close to my house. It was a large open farmer's field that joined onto another field which joined onto a motorway. It was a warm summer's day, really warm. One of those bright and lovely English summer days. So we got the leash on her and made our way into the field. Doing a loop around it, and then making our way back to the path that leads onto the housing estate where I lived. As we were nearing the path, at this point we were maybe 100 meters from it, I saw a scruffy, unkempt-looking man on one of those older style bicycles, the ones with a basket in the front and the thin tires. Well, he spotted us as well. Two young blonde boys walking out of a field with a puppy. As soon as he saw us, he stopped, looked at us for a little bit, maybe 30 seconds, then got off his bicycle, resting it against a fence that ran across the side of the field, separating the housing estate from the farmlands. He then proceeded to slowly walk towards us, keeping his eyes drawn on us the whole time. As he got a bit closer, I noticed he was also smirking. I still remember that ugly face of his. White, long, scruffy hair appearing from underneath a tweed flat cap. A white beard covering most of his face, but for some reason, I can remember that smirk on his face to this day. I told Mitch to stop. He was oblivious to the man. But I knew something wasn't right. My parents warned me about men who do bad things to little kids. And I just had a bad feeling about this guy. I think due to the fact that he didn't take his eyes off us once, and he was just smirking this whole time. So, there we were, stood completely still in his field as he lumbered towards us. I had no idea what to do. So I said, let's walk this way, sideways, across the field so he wasn't coming directly towards us. As we started walking across the field, he changed direction, the same way we were going. I knew then that this wasn't right. I felt genuine panic for the first time in my life. There we were, walking slowly across the field with this guy following us. Slowly. He wasn't running, never even picking up the pace, just casually walking towards us. And then the miracle happened, a true miracle. A young woman, maybe in her 20s, appeared from the side of the fence, near where his bike was, walking her dog, a golden retriever. I thought, okay, this is our chance now. So I said to Mitch, follow me. I still think he had no idea what was going on at the time. Years later, he said he did. But he just seemed so oblivious, so calm. So we started running towards the woman who at this point was kind of directly behind the man, but further back. He was a good quarter of the way into the field by now. We ran at a funny angle. We didn't want to run directly into him, but we needed to get to the woman. So we kind of ran in a semicircle, around and behind him. I then pointed at the woman. I don't know why, but this made the old man look. He had now noticed her, and that's when I saw him run, back towards his bike, not at us. He ran as fast as he could, I imagine, hobbling along. As soon as he reached his bike, he was on it, and rode off as fast as he could, in the opposite direction of my house. Phew. This whole time, the woman never even looked in our direction, not once. She had no idea what was going on, but I am positive she stopped something terrible happening. A hero without even knowing. Me and Mitch bolted from my house, which wasn't far from the field, maybe 900 meters in total. We didn't stop once, we just ran and ran, like Forrest Gump. Poor Maggie was excited. She loved running, however, she was still tiny. So we were essentially dragging her across the floor as we ran. My front door flew open from the force of us running through it. My parents came out of the kitchen, wondering what on earth that loud crash was. then instantly asked me what was wrong. They must have seen the concern on my face. I told them what happened. My father, being the man he was, asked what he looked like. He then instantly ran off out the door looking for him. I sat in my house with Mitch. I was still a bit shaken up. It must have been an hour before my dad returned. No sign of him. Said he had walked through all the fields and all of the estate. I guess the creep knew better than to stick around. I guess he knew I was on to him and he'd missed his chance. My mom rang Mitch's parents to come pick him up, even though he only lived 5 streets up, informed them of what happened. They looked so shocked. We lived in such a nice neighborhood. From that day on, we weren't allowed in the fields, and if we did, we had to be supervised by a parent at all times. Even going to the local store to get sweets was like a military operation. I hated it. But I see now why our parents were so concerned. So that's my story. When I was in college, my roommate and I made a late decision to stay in town for the summer and take a couple of classes. Since we made the decision later than most, we couldn't stay in our current place and ended up connecting with friends of friends who wanted to sublease their apartment through the summer. Their community wasn't our first choice, but it was cheaper and short-term. The complex was further out from campus and pretty spread out. It wasn't known as a popular student housing option and was maybe a little sketchy. But college living arrangements can be questionable. The units were set up in 3-story buildings, 2 units per floor. Instead of a main entrance with an interior staircase, the stairs were outside, like a center stairwell. Every unit had a balcony, and oddly, the balcony doors didn't lock. Our new place was on the 2nd floor once you opened our balcony door. Our front door was straight ahead, and my roommate's bedroom window was to your right. Our building was pretty quiet. The other 2nd floor unit was empty, and we had occasionally seen tenants on the 1st floor, but never heard or saw anyone on the 3rd. One weekend, my roommate went home and I had the place to myself. I went to the movies with a friend who dropped me off at 11. She was in a rush and took off while I was still walking up to my building. It was dark, but the building was decently lit, so I wasn't speedwalking. I had just reached the stairs when I heard a male voice say, "Hey," from a balcony. Being a younger girl, I ignored it and didn't look up. "Hey!" This time the voice was insistent and frustrated, so I started walking as fast as I could up the stairs. I had just reached the 2nd floor landing when I heard a balcony door above me bang open, and someone with heavy footsteps come hurrying out. I yanked my balcony door open, slammed it, and promptly dropped my keys. I panicked, so getting my keys and unlocking my door felt like slow motion. I got the door unlocked and slammed it behind me, locking it again as fast as I could. I leaned against the door in kind of a dazed relief, and then heard my balcony door open. All of the lights in my place were off, and I was too scared to move around. I was afraid if I looked in the peephole, this guy would be staring right at me. So I pressed my ear against the door and listened. "Are you in there?" He must have said it right into the door because it was right in my ear. I jumped off the door like someone had fired a gun. Then the doorknob moved casually, like nothing was weird. Then a little bit harder. Then like someone was clearly rattling it. Then the whole door frame shook. He started throwing himself against the door, kicking it, putting his weight into it. I started crying, but still hadn't moved much. I kind of couldn't believe what was happening. I kept thinking he left. He'd go crazy on the door, then stop, then start again. After a couple attempts, he talked into the door again. He wasn't yelling. It was just this low, hateful voice. "Open the fucking door, you little bitch." I really started crying hard when he started quietly laughing. It would go from pounding to silence, and then this little burst of laughter, like he couldn't hold it in. The way someone laughs when they're trying not to. He started kicking my roommate's window, and trying to yank that open next. I finally ran to my bedroom and called 911. This was a small place, so I could hear him while I waited. I made the operator promise me about 5 times that officers were there before I would come to the door. The cops had led him off the balcony, and one came inside to talk to me. The officer explained the man was claiming I was his girlfriend, and I had locked him out. He had said we had been drinking a lot, and I was drunk and confused. The cop was a little harsh before he realized I was sober and terrified. He asked me if I would look at the man and confirm he was a stranger, and I would take my word. I really didn't want to look this man in the eye, but agreed. The man was being held by another cop in my balcony doorway, totally calm. He was very tall and had long, dark hair to his shoulders. He was definitely older than a student. Maybe early to mid-30s, but normal looking. The way he looked at me, though, made my stomach drop. He had this expectant little smile on his face, like any minute now, I was going to confirm his story. Obviously I did not, and darted back into my place. Apparently, after I went back inside, he started trying to fight off the cop, and they officially arrested him. The worst part was when they were walking him down the stairs, he started screaming, "I know she's alone in there. She's by herself in there." I don't know if he had been watching us or was just insane, but it was extremely disturbing. I didn't spend much time there for the rest of the summer. The apartment office let me know because of my situation and the state of his apartment. He had been evicted and I never saw him again. It upset me for a long time to think about what could have happened if he had been faster, or if I had been slower getting to my door. A little background story about me. I am a female, Colombian, 29 years old, athletic, and adventurous. I enjoy traveling, walking, hiking, camping. This happened about 6 years ago. In one of these trips, I was with my ex-boyfriend and our 2 dogs. He had a crossbreed brown lab-looking dog, and mine is a golden retriever. Not scary dogs at all, but definitely big and with powerful barks. We always went walking with them on trails and exploring around the city limits. But this time, he had heard about this river in the middle of the mountains with a huge cascade that seemed to be out of this world. The place was described to him by his college mates, and it sounded beautiful. So we assumed it would be a fun way to spend our Sunday morning and early afternoon. We packed simple bags with sandwiches, snacks, water, and beer, and off we went. Once we made it to the beginning of the trail, The dogs seemed impatient. They were very active when they were together, so we assumed they just wanted to run, and we let them loose. The mountain started out in a very steep way. We pretty much had to climb along sharp rocks for about 15 minutes before we could reach the actual trail. Keep in mind that Colombia is nothing like the United States. Our wild areas are actually wild. No trails designated, no forest rangers, no watchtowers, none of that sort. Once you're out of the city limits, you are pretty much on your own. And there is certainly no cops or anything around these areas. They are highly underpopulated and overall deserted. Once we reached the trail, we noticed that it was hardly visible to see it. Trails are usually patches of the forest that are not as prominent, so you can see somewhat of a trail left, but it was made by people or animals walking around, so it gets very faint sometimes, and many times you don't see it, or have no idea where to go. This trail was like that, which we actually liked, because that means there would be no people around bothering us, and we could smoke and enjoy the river on our own. We got excited and kept walking through the almost invisible trail. A little ways down, we started hearing branches break, voices, and a little bit of laughter. We looked at each other with disappointment because we wanted to be alone. And these sounds clearly indicated that we were not. We kept walking, and then we saw some colors and shapes through the bushes. They stopped as well and saw us. The elderly man waved, and he was getting closer. His wife walked behind, but holding him from his elbow. They walked slowly as we exchanged pleasantries about the day, and what a nice day to hike sort of thing. When they reached us, he looked up at us as he was petting the dogs. They had come closer to them and were now wagging their tails around, and said, "You guys heading back?" To what we responded with, "No, we actually just got started. We wanted to reach the waterfall in the mountain over there." He looked at where I was pointing and frowned. I found it odd, and he replied, "You guys should be careful. I hear a lot of stories about people getting lost in these parts, or even worse. We're better off heading back with us." We both thought the old man was just being a wet blanket, and we were somewhat experts in trails, hiking, camping, and living on the edge. So my ex said, "Nah, we will be fine. We have these two beasts to protect us." To which we all kinda chuckled. He then said, "Well, anyway, be very careful, and you, sweetheart, you should tuck in that little golden chain inside your shirt. You never know who is looking for that stuff to yank it off." I had yet to think about that. I was wearing a little golden chain on my neck, except it wasn't golden. It was a 24-karat gold chain that was given to me by my godfathers when I was born. It was a tradition in my family that every time a baby was born, all uncles, aunts, friends, and close family members gave us gold accents with different shapes and forms, as well as a chain to hang them all from. This is a Colombian thing, and it mostly ensures good luck for the new baby by presenting gold gifts, as the three wise men did to Jesus. I had found the chain on my mom's safe during my last visit to her house, and was wearing it ever since. No accents though, just the chain. The accents were so many that they weighed a ton. But I liked the chain because it made me feel safe somehow. I grabbed it instinctively and tucked it inside my shirt collar. We exchanged goodbyes with the couple and off we went. We were hiking for over an hour, stopping here and there to take pictures, drink water, or give the dogs a treat. Nothing weird until then. And we were almost at the mountain. We could faintly hear the waterfall. The next part of the way was rougher though. We had to climb down this cliff, literally a cliff. And we didn't bring any gear, so we had to be extra careful with the dogs. But they did it rather quickly and with no hassle. While I was heading down though, my ex was waiting for me at the base of the cliff with his dog. Mine had turned back. She always does this when she's hiking with me, to come down again with me. But stopped at the top and stared at the woods before the cliff. She stared, and then started growling. This is weird. My dog is by far the sweetest dog ever, and she never growls. But this time she seemed fierce. She kept growling more and more while I called for her. Fermina, Fermina, come here. She then looked at me, almost halfway down the cliff, and then back at the woods, and then back at me again, and started heading down. She would stop every now and then and stare back at the woods, but eventually got down with me and kept walking. The mountains have created a natural junction with water falling from the very top to a clear pond at the bottom. The water was freezing cold and the noise was pretty intense. The dogs were beyond themselves. They started running, jumping, chasing each other, barking and swimming. We got off our clothes and jumped in as well. It was delicious. The cold water against the hot weather felt like heaven. And we were high by then, so the sensations were very strong. We kept playing in the water for a while. Then we got out and sat on the rocks to smoke some more. After a while we heard the dogs barking, but not playfully like before. They were barking loud and menacingly. We looked at them, and they were both at the very edge of the pond, staring at the woods on the top of the mountain, and barking. The fur on their backs was raised. They looked creepy. I called Fermina again, and my boyfriend did the same with Rebecca. But none of them flinched. Their paws were firm on the ground, grasping at it. Their barks were so loud it was becoming unbearable. I got up and walked over there and grabbed Fermina by her torso, just kinda giving her a hug and pulling her towards me. She kinda snapped me out of it and started licking me ferociously. I kept asking, "What's wrong, girl? What's wrong?" And she just whimpered, licked me, and then started going back and forth from the edge of the pond to where I was kneeling. She whimpered really loud, like crying, and I was getting scared. I said to my ex, "Screw it, I'm out of here. She's acting really weird." Rebecca, his dog, always barked at everything, so he wasn't concerned at all. He agreed and we started packing. Then I heard something, a whistle. It was definitely a human whistle. Sounded like a little melody. First a long one and then two short ones. I stopped dead in my track and tried to hear it again, over the barking and the waterfall, but couldn't hear it no more. I thought to myself, weirdest bird ever, and put my backpack on. We started walking back to the cliff again, and the dogs were getting worse. It was almost impossible to hear anything besides them barking and growling, and Fermina whimpering by my side. I started climbing first. My ex was behind me, and the dogs made it to the top in no time, and started barking again and growling into the woods. I kept telling Fermina to shut it, but she wouldn't. And then I finally made it to the top. One side had a huge drop over 50 to 80 feet, and on the other there was the woods. Tall pine trees and wild bushes everywhere made them look dense and deep. I urged my boyfriend to hurry because the dogs were unbearable, and then I heard it. Branches breaking. The dogs got even more aggressive. They started running towards the edge of the forest, back and forth to where I was. I just stood there staring as well. More branches. Now they were getting louder. I knew someone was there, getting closer with each step. I kept trying to see past the tree line, but only saw green and brown and darkness. But then a figure started emerging from it. At first I thought it was another couple or maybe just a hiker like us. But this figure was moving weird, and a little too heavy to be a hiker. And slowly, and had no backpack, but the hands were holding something in front of him. A shotgun? What is this? I freaked out. The dogs started barking louder, and Rebecca almost jumped the guy when he came out of the woods. He was stocky, wearing a black jacket, shotgun pointed straight at me. I yelled at Rebecca, "Stop, come here." And she actually did. Weird, 'cause she never listens. He then said, "Tell your boyfriend to come up." And I just took a couple of steps back. I was almost on the edge of the cliff and stared down. My boyfriend was almost there and he had heard the voice of the man. He hurried up and climbed to where I was. I was standing there petrified, not being able to talk, just looking at the dark circle of the shotgun barrel. Then I caught a glance of something shiny, something metal-looking. He had a machete hanging from his belt loop. Just like that. A huge machete with rusty edges. I was beside myself, but I managed to grab my boyfriend's hand as he stood up on the top of the cliff and stared at the man. My ex was nothing less than scary. He was easily 6'8" and weighed over 200 pounds. I don't know how much because we use the metric system in Colombia. But he was, for all intents and purposes, a big, muscular guy. His green eyes glared as he stared at the man, and then he said, "Take what you want and leave us." The noise the dogs were making was extreme. The guy looked at me and pointed the gun and said, "Grab those dogs and shut them up or I'll shoot them both right here." I called them softly and grabbed Fermina by the collar. She started licking me and whimpering, scared and not understanding what was going on. Rebecca was a little rascal, so I kind of crawled on the ground to grab her by the back leg. She then turned around and I grabbed her collar. I held them both close to me while I petted them, whispering, "Shh, it's okay, girl, it's okay," over and over. I was in tears by then, but my ex stood his ground and just kept glaring. I saw his fists and he held them tightly closed, as if he was going to punch the guy. Then the guy whistled. It was the same whistle I have heard before, the long one and then two short ones. The weird bird. Two more figures started coming out of the woods on each side of him. One of them had a silver revolver. Don't know about guns, so bear with me. And the other one was just standing there menacingly. He then said to my ex, "Don't try anything stupid, pretty boy." And they started getting closer. I actually thought of jumping off the cliff, but then what? Even if I made it alive, they could easily shoot me from a distance in the canyon underneath. We were trapped. He then said, "Give me the bags," to which we replied by taking them off and sliding them on the ground closer to them. And then he said, "Stand up," looking at me and pointing the gun. could now see his face. He had sunspots all over and really bad acne. His eyes were dark and small like a bird's eyes. His hair was greasy and covered with a dirty black beanie. A big round nose completed the look and gave him an almost comical appearance. Nothing comical about the shotgun, though. I stood up, holding the collars of the dogs tight together, and he then said, not bad. Not bad at all. He then turned to look at the guy with the revolver and said, "Bring me that gold chain." I kind of gasped when he said that, and the other guy started walking towards me. The dogs started pulling the leashes. He stopped and looked at them. And then the other guy said, "I don't like these fuckers. Let's get rid of them." I was full on crying by then and just said, "No, please, no, hold on, I'll get it for you." I took the leashes with one hand and with the other yanked the chain off my neck and turned and gave it to my ex. He grabbed it and stared at me. He knew how much it meant to me and my family, but it was either that or our lives. So he turned and walked towards the guy. He grabbed it quickly and went back to his position. The other guy then stared at us, then back at the guys on his side and asked them, "Have you ever had your way with a little spoiled girl?" And they all laughed. I feel like throwing up. My ex looked even more angry now. Then he said, "We don't have anything else. Please let us go." Then the guy quieted down and stared back. "You do have something else. I'm deciding whether or not to let you walk out of here with it." And he then gave me a perverted look that made my skin crawl. My ex then said, "Sure, you can have your way with her." In such a calm way, I thought he was giving me away. And then added, "After you fucking cowards fight me one by one and beat me until I'm dead. 'Cause that is the only way." They all laughed at this, loud chuckles, and he then said, "Nah, not worth it. I could just shoot you and be done with it." And then pointed the gun at him. I was in shock. I couldn't believe this is how our lives were going to end. Massacred over a stupid gold chain. 1,000 thoughts were going through my head. I was shivering when I heard this really faint whistle, very far away. Same frequency as theirs, but it was definitely far away, at least 3 miles away. It was faint, but I heard it, and they did too. The guy with the shotgun stopped laughing and stood still as if trying to listen better this way. And then the whistle was there again, but this time, the first whistle was way longer. And the three of them started walking backwards, almost retracing their steps back to the woods. And then the guy said, "You two fuckers are in luck," and turned around and disappeared as fast as they had shown up. My ex and I exchanged looks of astonishment and then vaulted out of there, running through the woods like maniacs. The dogs were rattled up, and they also jumped and ran all the way down to the main road. We didn't stop. We didn't talk. We didn't even look back. We just ran and jumped and stumbled until we were in the first climb again. Then we looked back. I thought we saw something moving behind the tree line, but I brushed it off as I jumped down and called out to Fermina. We then started walking home at a slower pace this time. Not excited anymore, thinking how we would enter the flat without any keys. They were in my backpack. I touched my neck. The yanking of the chain left a little red mark. After all, it was solid gold. what I should be doing, my college summer homework. What I'm going to do instead, tell you about my old friend, Nate from Scotland. Anyone who's ever been on the internet knows that internet creeps are dime a dozen. However, I felt like this particular internet creep deserved a post on LNM for the bizarre story he wove to try and gain my trust, along with a slew of other things. When I was 14, I met a girl online named Kelly. While we originally bonded over our mutual love of K-pop boy bands, we soon became friends who shared everything with each other. We sent each other PMs almost every day, talking about her families, school, funny videos we found online, all that jazz. Eventually, Kelly suggested that we make accounts on an instant chat site she had found, so we could more easily talk to each other. I agreed, and so it happened. All that backstory will be important later. I promise. The only reason I made the account on the site was to talk to Kelly, but I had no idea how to make my account private, and it wasn't long until I started getting messages from random people. I'm not sure how other instant messaging sites work, but on this one, whenever someone messaged you, it would open in a new tab in your chat box. So I was talking to Kelly and meanwhile trying to deal with all this sudden attention. My profile said I was female and that I was 14. So a lot of the messages were from straight up pervs, and I, being the sensitive, polite girl I was, responded with "Nope, sorry," and closed the tab. However, there was a message from one guy that was pretty normal, Nate. It was something along the lines of, "Hey, I love AOM." For the record, any dialogue in this story is approximated. Obviously, I don't remember what anyone said, typed word for word. It took me a second to figure out what he meant, but then I realized he was referring to my profile, where I had mentioned that I liked the game Age of Mythology. In retrospect, I have no idea why I had filled out my profile so extensively. It had all my likes and hobbies, my first name, and my age. I guess I like to fill out profiles. Since his message was so benign, I felt obligated to respond. We properly introduced ourselves and talked for a bit. When I told Kelly I was talking to a guy in another tab, she was instantly wary. I guess she had better instincts than I did. For the record, Nate was claiming to be 23, almost 10 years older than me. "I can be like your confidant," he had told me. "You can tell me anything, even stuff you can't tell your parents." Now that I'm typing this all out, I'm realizing that he was trying to groom me. Unfortunately for him, my parents are awesome, and I had no desire to replace them with another adult. Things were pretty uninteresting at first, conversation-wise, but I remember that he was on all the time. Whenever I got on to talk to Kelly, he would be there. Late at night, early in the morning, during school hours, it didn't matter, he was there. The site even had a downloadable messenger that notified you whenever someone on your friends list got online. I wouldn't even be on the chat site, and he would send me messages the moment I got on the computer. He told me he was from Scotland, so that kind of explained the weird hours. But Scottish people sleep too, right? After a while, talking to him got old. We didn't have that much in common, and he started only asking about me and talking less and less about himself. He did tell me that he wanted to be in the circus, and that he struggled with depression, and that I was the only light in his life. Unfortunately, my bleeding heart broke at the thought of leaving him all alone, so I kept talking to him. Meanwhile, Kelly continued to be wary, but she kept it low-key, probably because she didn't want to offend me, as I was always insisting that he was a good guy. Then, things got weird. Well, weirder. Nate had already asked me to be his girlfriend multiple times, which I always declined, saying that the distance was too great. In reality, the thought of dating him kind of freaked me out. I should have realized at this point that I really shouldn't be talking to him, but I was a naive, barely teen, who had never taken an internet safety class. Once it became clear that I wasn't going to date him, he started telling me about his family. He told me he lived in a commune of sorts, with adoptive parents and a whole bunch of adoptive siblings. He told me he shared a room with an adoptive sister named Dana, who was in her 20s as well. Okay, cool, I guess. Then Dana started messaging me on his account. "You heartless bitch," was what she sent me. My stomach dropped. I had never been called a bitch before in my life. I replied with, "What?" I had no idea what was going on. She told me it was Dana, who Nate had never mentioned until the day before. She asked why I rejected her brother, that he was a great guy and I would be lucky to have him. I explained that I lived too far away and that I was too young for him. There was a long pause, then the message. "I'm so sorry about my sister." Nate had gotten back on. He apologized, saying that he had no idea why she did that he had yelled at her and defended me. Thoroughly weirded out, but still an idiot, I said it was okay, and I apologized again for not being able to date him. He said it was fine. Some more time passed. Nate started getting more invasive. He asked me what my bra size was, and when I said I didn't want to tell him, he kept pushing. "I'll tell you Dana's size if you tell me yours," he said. "It's not that big of a deal." But that only made it weirder. I told him no. He told me Donna's bra size. I said I still wouldn't tell him, and that I wanted him to stop asking about it. Please. After a bit more pushing, he did stop. Then he started saying he wanted to fly me out to Scotland. He kept talking about us meeting. He said he had told his entire family about me and that they loved me. And they wanted to meet me too, at one point. Dana. At this point, I was beginning to suspect they were the same person. Got on Nate's account again and apologized for blowing up at me. "I was just jealous," she told me. "I really like Nate, but all he ever talks about is you." Even though I knew they were adoptive siblings, her confession still gave me an uncomfortable knot in my stomach. I also noticed that Nate didn't say anything about those messages, even though they were in his account, and he could have easily seen them. When I told him my parents probably wouldn't let me go to Scotland by myself, Nate suggested that he move close to me. Then the distance wouldn't matter, and we can be together. He asked where I live so that he could move there. Getting more and more creeped out, I refused to tell him. I could tell he was getting frustrated, becoming more and more pushy. "At least send me a pic," he told me. I said I didn't give pictures of myself to people online, and he angrily told me that it was just one picture. It wasn't that big of a deal. "I'll send you one of me too," he said. I still said no, and he sent me a picture of himself. The guy in the photo was clearly an adult, but also very lanky with a mop of brown hair. I didn't really question whether it was him or not. "I sent you one," he told me. "Now you have to send me one too. It's only fair." Of course, pushover me thought that I really was somehow cheating him by not sending a pic. So without thinking, I agreed to send him one. Immediately after I sent the message, I panicked. I didn't want to send him a picture of myself. But now I had agreed to do just that. I felt trapped. So in my frantic rush to somehow fix the situation, I sent him a picture of a K-pop idol. A male K-pop idol, with long hair and soft features. It was a selfie, so it looked like a picture of just any regular person. As soon as I sent it to him, with some feeble "here it is" message, I started panicking again, worried that he would somehow recognize the guy and get mad at me. "Oh, P," he responded. "You're the most beautiful girl I've ever seen." I wish I could say the story ended there. But he immediately began begging me to be his girlfriend. I told him, once again, that I was sorry, but I couldn't. Then he got really quiet. Then he started sending a bunch of ellipses, which basically gives you no choice but to ask what's wrong. He said he wasn't sure if life was worth living anymore, if he couldn't get a girl as beautiful as me to date him. He said that maybe he should just end it all and stop being a bother to everyone. At this point, I'm freaking out, still ignorant as ever. I had no idea this was a classic form of manipulation, and I genuinely thought someone was about to kill himself because I had sent him a picture of a pretty boy. I sent him a really long, impassioned speech about how great life is and that he shouldn't give up. And that even though we couldn't date, I was glad to have met him. I'm not sure if it actually moved him or not, but he said that I had changed his view on the world and dropped the subject. After that debacle, Nate changed his tactics. He started claiming that he had feelings for Dana. Dana got on once more and asked me if I was sure I didn't want to date her brother. And when I said that yes, I was very sure, she said, "So you don't care if I go after him?" And I said I definitely didn't. Our contact started dying after that. Needless to say, I was relieved. Even though Nate made me incredibly uncomfortable, I also felt attached to him, simply because we had been talking for so long. I didn't have the heart to tell him myself that I didn't want to talk to him anymore. But then, after several weeks of not talking, Nate sent me a message. "Dana is pregnant." Wow. Okay. We continued not to talk much, but he would occasionally send me updates about the baby. Then, after not talking for months, he randomly started messaging me again. I tried to be polite and asked how he was doing, and he told me the baby had been born. I vaguely wondered if it had really been 9 months since we last talked, but, you know, whatever. "We named it after you." Why? Why? Why was his entire family so obsessed with me? They didn't even know me. Soon after, he told me his younger brother, who was my age, wanted to talk to me. It seemed to be a last-ditch effort to rope me back in, which by this point I saw straight through. His younger brother flirted with me a bit on his account, and when I didn't take the bait, Nate got back on and apologized for his brother. And so it happens, Kelly was also on at the time. Again, the only reason I used the site at all was to talk to her. In a separate tab, I told her that he was making me seriously uncomfortable, and I wasn't sure what to do. She told me to block him because she's a rational person with a backbone. But I was scared he'd get mad if I did. At this point, Dana had gotten on in the other chat tab and was telling me more about her baby daughter, explaining why they chose my name. Kelly was quiet for a while, then came back with, "Okay, I took care of it." Dana had fallen silent. I asked Kelly what she had done. She copy and pasted the message she had sent Nate's account. I can't remember it in great detail, but it was something along the lines of, "Look, you're making my friend seriously uncomfortable. You're crossing all the lines and you need to back off." At first, I was a bit upset. I hadn't asked her to do that for me, and I was scared Nate or Dana or whoever would start railing on me. However, all Dana sent me was, "Do we really make you uncomfortable?" Feigning ignorance, I asked her what she was talking about. "I think if you want to talk to us again, you'll have to be the one who initiates a conversation." I replied with, okay. And then they logged off, and it was done. I never heard from Nate or Dana or any member of that weird family again. So, I'm really bad at ending things. So I'll just say that, Kelly, you are my hero. Let's definitely meet someday. On a late summer night, I had just finished hanging out with my friends. We had gone for drinks, and my friend dropped me off in front of my gated apartment building. Since at that time my boyfriend wasn't on the lease, we shared my key fob to get into the building. So I would just call to tell him to come down and let me in, or vice versa. Sometimes the doorman will let me in, but oftentimes they'd get up to attend a problem on one of the floors or do something in the office. I called my boyfriend when I was pulling in, so now I was just waiting patiently by the door. The apartment building is gated, and cars can't get in without a remote. However, you can walk in on foot through a separate gate door. It was also connected to a plaza on one side, where there was a market, barber shop, and liquor store. Since I live in a big city in a high-rise building, there are always people sitting outside, and the liquor store can bring some pretty interesting characters around. However, this night happened to be a weekday, and it was pretty quiet. I was just looking down at my phone when I randomly took a glance around. I noticed a guy standing at the other end of the lot looking at me. As soon as I looked at him, he looked away. I didn't think much about it, honestly. I'm a decent-looking girl, and it's common for a guy to take a glance. I started wondering what's taking my boyfriend so long and decide to call him. He answers and says he accidentally spilled the drink on the carpet and was trying to clean it up before the stain sets. I roll my eyes and tell him to hurry up and hang up. When I turned back around, I almost jumped out of my skin. The guy that had been looking at me had silently moved so close to me, he was within reach. Clearly startled, I said something like, "You scared the shit out of me." The guy was pretty expressionless, but he responded, "Do you live here?" This guy was totally unassuming. White guy in a t-shirt and baseball cap. But something about the way he crept up on me and then asked me that, it totally creeped me out. Without thinking, I nervously blurted out, "Yes, are you trying to get in to see someone?" Before he could answer, my neighbor had walked out of the building, and upon recognizing me, started to chit-chat. The conversation was brief, but the guy had backed away, clearly taking a hint that he wasn't about to be included in the conversation. My neighbor walked to her car and drove off. I didn't see the guy anywhere and completely wrote him off. So my boyfriend finally comes out and says he wants to walk to the gas station really quick. Would I like to come? Sure, I had nothing better to do. It was just to walk past a couple of intersections and then onto the corner of the main road. The walk was pretty dark when it came to streetlights, but I never felt unsafe as it was always pretty populated, and I especially felt fine with another person with me. Now, I did have a few drinks in me, so when we were walking up the street, I was lagging a little behind, probably swaying a little bit. I was maybe 10 to 15 feet behind my boyfriend. When he reached an intersection and he realized I was behind him, he turned around and said something like, "Hey, are you going to catch up to me or not?" And then immediately made a face. Then he said, "That was really shady." What was shady? What are you talking about? When it was our turn to walk, he took my hand and led me across and said, "Some guy was walking behind you. But when I turned around and said something to you, he literally all of a sudden turned around and started walking the opposite direction." What guy? I turned my head around just in time to see the unmistakable t-shirt and baseball cap. That same guy that had lurked around the door was crossing the street, going the opposite direction. I saw him glance over his shoulder, directly at me, and, the drinks acting for me, I raised my hand high in the air and flipped him off. He turned around and then turned the corner and was gone. My boyfriend and I walked home, and I crawled into bed and went right into my drunken sleep. It wasn't until the next morning, when my boyfriend mentioned it again, that I actually realized how creepy that was. That guy had known I lived there, and my boyfriend was adamant that that man had been following me, thinking I was by myself. Too much of a coincidence to just turn around abruptly and walk the opposite way. He said he wished he would have thought quickly and confronted him. I'm glad he didn't. It made me shiver, and I watched out my window at the main entrance every day for like a week. I'm over it now. As my boyfriend lives with me, we have a dog, and my apartment building has cameras and a 24-hour doorman. I don't feel unsafe, but I still find myself looking around for that guy. And I make sure that my boyfriend is already at the door waiting for me when I come home at night. Even if I have my own key fob now, better safe than sorry. Creepy t-shirt followy man, let's not ever meet. Before I left for college, I had a boyfriend whom I had been dating since I was 16. He and I had many arguments, but I never really felt it was a problem until I decided to end things for good. He would do things like show up at my house after a fight, and I thought it was weird, but he said it was because he cared, so I believed him. During the summer of going to senior year, we broke up, and he decided to go somewhere to work. Now, due to where he moved, he didn't really have any reception until he would come back on the weekends, which I was thankful for since I didn't want to see him anymore. It was there he met a girl and they started dating, but he would still call me obsessively. I just brushed it off as him wanting to have his cake and eat it too, so I told him to leave me alone. Around this time I had met my current boyfriend, and he was kind of aware of the situation, but he also brushed it off as just an ex who couldn't get over the fact that it was over. So my ex and his girl were dating, but he would still show up to my house and leave presents, thrown in my grass or doorstep or whatever, and I would leave them there or throw them away, never opening them. When I told my best friend, she of course followed the girl on Instagram and stalked and stuff, and one day she told me they had broken up. Now, at this time, I was already officially dating my boyfriend, so my biggest concern was that he would start showing up to my house again. Now, my ex knew I was going to move far away from my home to go to university, and he would constantly message me telling me to see him one last time. Now, before you guys say, "You idiot, you should have blocked him," I did. He would use his friends' phones or download apps so he could message me from those. Fast forward on my birthday. Things have died down, and I didn't have a huge 18th birthday because I like keeping to myself. So it was just my small family, my dad, mom, sister, and boyfriend, eating my favorite food and cake. It was around 9 or 10 because we had just gotten home from the shopping mall. So we were getting ready to eat when the doorbell rings. Now, because our house has been broken into twice, and it is in a dangerous neighborhood, my parents did get a little freaked out. So my dad opened the door. "Hey look, my ex." He asked if I was home, and of course my dad said no, and my ex replied, "I see her boyfriend's car." Keep in mind that I had never seen him while I was dating my boyfriend, so there was no way I thought he could have known it was his car. But whatever, I shrugged it off as him guessing. My dad was stubborn and said I wasn't there. And the whole time, my little sister is looking at me and my boyfriend like, what the fuck? Finally, he left and started calling me frantically and told me that I had called his girlfriend, bullying her. Which I knew was a lie because I was with my boyfriend all the time, and she wasn't his girlfriend anymore. She was dating someone else. He called me a bitch and a cunt, and said I had called him telling him to save me because my boyfriend would beat me and rape me. Now this angered me, because he knew I had been raped by a family friend when I was younger, and I didn't joke about things like that. So before my boyfriend could go beat him up, I just told him that I was going to call the cops. The cops were so helpful. They said they couldn't do anything because I replied, and it looks like I'm asking for it. For the next couple of days, he's throwing rocks at my house, and he's calling me from weird numbers. Half of the calls crying, half of the calls telling me he's outside. Until they just stopped. Completely. So I thought it was over for real. And fast forward to now, August. Me and my boyfriend are living together far away from my childhood home. Now, remember when I said John knew where I was moving? Well, my boyfriend got a friend request from him on Instagram, and he also texted me. We blocked his number on my phone, and my ex DM'd my boyfriend. The message said, "Hey, I'm in location here. You guys should come out and show me around the city." We didn't believe him because he's full of shit, but the next message, "This is your apartment building, right?" And he sent us a screenshot of our apartment building. So, for now, I'm not allowed to go outside, and my boyfriend and I don't have more than a month here. We don't know anyone. So, Creepy X, please, let's not meet. Update. So far he doesn't stop messaging my boyfriend. He keeps saying he just wants to talk. He flew over 2,000 miles to talk. Also, I did leave a couple details out about this ex-girlfriend, but she has recently messaged me, telling me to be careful. One time he messaged me quite early in the morning and asked how I was. Stupid me, because at this time, I didn't think he was that crazy. Replied. Later during the night because I had worked a 10-hour shift. My work doesn't care if I'm a minor, and I like making money, okay? So I replied, "Doing good, how's work?" And she texted me saying that she doesn't wish to be rude, but they had been dating and he had moved on, so I should too. And I didn't even know she existed. So I respected and didn't reply. Apparently what happened was that during that time, he had told her I was the one stalking, and couldn't get over it because he was my first. When I didn't text back and she saw I was talking to someone else, and she never saw my phone number popping up when they were together. They work together and live in the same area. They were together a lot. She got curious. So she decided to do her own little creeping. She found out which app he used to text me. How he found my new address. I guess he found a friend who's quite handy in tech stuff. She also has screenshots of him and his friends texting in a group chat about how they're going to get my Instagram pictures and use them on fake accounts, and my other friends to make fake accounts and bully her to make his story believable. Really need to appreciate this girl's stalk game. It's strong. I called the cops again with this new information, and they told me that currently they still could do nothing. Some fucking bullshit about me being in a different state, and how it isn't technically their case to handle. My friend, whom I met during orientation, messaged me saying some guy messaged her, claiming to be my boyfriend, that he accidentally lost his keys. And I wasn't home, and he needed to get into the apartment if she could buzz him in. Luckily, she hasn't moved into her apartment yet, so she isn't currently in our apartment building. Our apartment is like 3 minutes away from our university, so a lot of college kids live there. I don't know if I mentioned that. She said he didn't seem alarmed or anything. He simply said, "Thank you, I'll just wait until she gets home then." I'm incredibly scared because if he found all this out, I would not be surprised. If he shows up at my boyfriend's work, which is a easy 10-minute walk from our apartment, I'm scared because I'm fucking 18, 5'2", 110. I don't even look 18. The only thing calming me down is that you have to get buzzed in to enter our apartment building, since it automatically locks when you close the entry door behind you. Thankfully, my boyfriend hasn't seen him while he goes to work or comes back. Thank God, because he gets home really late. Update, August 9th, 2016. As of right now, neither me or my boyfriend have actually physically seen him. But something happened and I thought I would update. Yesterday was my boyfriend's day off, and whenever he's working, I usually show up and take him some little snack from the dollar store. We're currently struggling quite a bit financially, so I like to do this to kind of be like, hey Nugget, it's okay, we're going to get through this and be okay. Positive vibes, you know? It's all about the positive vibes. This is important because I show up every day he works at the same time, simply because I got used to that time, I'm not sure why. Anyways, I'm really friendly, so all the girls there and I usually chat for a while, and one or two take their lunch and we hang out at the Sephora place and whatnot. I'm rambling, I'm so sorry. I'll get to the point. Today my boyfriend shows up to work and his co-worker mentions that he already made quota today. And he gets kind of confused. Whenever someone in a jewelry store buys something but mentions a specific person's name, they automatically get the sale. So she tells him what happened on his day off. Around the time I usually show up with the snack, she said it was slow and they got kind of excited when the door opened, thinking it was me. Cute, I know. When they saw a young man and the co-worker went to help him. He said he was looking for a promise ring for his girlfriend, and they needed to get something today. He already knew what ring he wanted, and he was going to pay cash. He asked for my boyfriend, but he wasn't there. And she was like, no, I'm sorry, it's his day off. And the guy asked questions about me and she got a little weirded out, but just said, she only comes in when he's working, usually around this time. And he just said, yeah, I know. She helps him and he buys the same ring that my boyfriend got me as a promise ring. And she's seen my ring, so she thought it was weird but brushed it off, as my boyfriend probably just previously showed him that ring to make conversation. She still gets curious and she's never seen him in the store, and asks when he came in and stuff. And he said he probably came in when she was off, which could honestly be true. He then starts asking when my boyfriend is going to work, and I guess she figured there were a lot of things off about this dude. So she just said she didn't know because the schedules hadn't been made yet. He got the ring and left. My boyfriend asked a description and of course it was him. So for now, my Dollar Tree adventures, as well as any of them for that matter, I'm job searching, so I usually walk around the shops and do a lot of wandering by myself while he's at work. I've been cut off. I don't know what to feel right now. I think it's still unreal to me because I haven't physically seen him. And it's my stupid head that always sees the best in people, that doesn't want me to believe that he would hurt me or my boyfriend. My aunt found out from my mom, and she called me and immediately gave me the, "You're fucking little. You better not try to do anything because he could easily just pick your little ass up and take you" speech. And it's like everyone around me is taking all of these precautions. And it's like a dream to me because I didn't think that it could ever happen to me. And I'm usually quiet about things like this, and I don't know how to cope. My boyfriend is scared for me, and he's already so stressed. And so is my mom and dad, since I've never been this far away from home. And I'm telling everyone I'm okay, and I will be safe, and I keep reassuring my little sister and FaceTiming her every night, and telling her not to be scared. That is nothing. But I really just wanted to stop. So this is something that happened to me a few weeks ago. I'm a 19-year-old female and I have EMT training. That'll be relevant in just a minute. Okay, so my friend and I were driving to Walmart. It was about 10:30 at night. We live in what used to be the meth capital of the United States. I don't think our state is the meth capital anymore. We were stopped at a stoplight in the turn lane to go into the Walmart parking lot. 2 cars passed us going at regular speed. My friend was driving and I was on the phone with one of our other friends. All of a sudden, I heard my friend Anna say, "Hey, Grey 124, did that car just crash?" Intrigued, I looked up and saw the 2 cars that had just passed us in an accident only maybe 100 feet from us. I was kind of excited, which sounds awful, but I had just finished my EMT training not too long before, so I told her to get into the other lane and go over to the accident so we could check it out. When we got over there, the car that had been hit had 2 people in it, male crackhead and female crackhead. Male crackhead was pissed. The car that had been behind them hit them from the back and made their car spin off into a greasy area off the side of the road. Female crackhead was screaming in the front seat about how her hip hurt, and head, and anything else. But when we asked if they wanted us to call for an ambulance, they said no. And they also didn't want us to call the police. Well, we weren't about to do that, so we called the police anyways. It was hard to pinpoint our exact location, so it took them forever to get there. While we were waiting, I kept checking on female crackhead, as she kept changing her story about where she was hurt, and would only act hurt when I asked her if she was okay. In the other car, the one that hit them, was a super sweet 18-year-old boy. He was terrified. We all kind of figured out the situation. Crackhead car slammed on their brakes and didn't use their turn signal, and the boy didn't have enough time to stop. While we were waiting for the police to arrive, Black Jeep pulled up behind the crackhead's car, and male crackhead started throwing a bunch of stuff into a diaper bag they had in the back seat, before handing it off to the guy in the black Jeep. We proceeded to drive away. When the police got there, Anna and I gave them a statement and told them what was going on, and crackhead guy overheard us telling the police how it was pretty much their fault, and how we were pretty sure male crackhead had given drugs to the black Jeep that came. Anyways, once the police were done with us, Anna and I left to go to Walmart. When we turned into Walmart, a red car had followed us. I was on the phone, again. This time with my mom, telling her about the weird accident we had witnessed. Well, we pulled into a parking spot, and the red car pulled in 2 spots down from us. I wasn't paying attention. Thank God Anna was there, or this might have ended really bad. Anna nudged me and said, "Hey, I think that car followed us in here, and now they're staring at us." I shrugged her off and told her that she was being crazy. Well, when I looked over, there were 2 guys in the red car and they were staring at us. When they noticed us, they whipped it out of their parking space and drove all the way around to the other side of the parking lot, to where they were parked across from us. And they kept staring at us. Anna was freaked out, so she decided we should just leave and go to a different Walmart. So we pulled out of our parking spot quickly and started driving towards the exit. Red car guy immediately hit the gas and drove all the way to our exit where he was blocking us in. That's when we noticed it was the same man who had been driving the Jeep earlier. Freaked out, we put it in reverse and found a different way to get out of the parking lot, and we drove back to where the police were still at the accident and told them everything that had happened. The black Jeep came back while we were talking to the police, with a different driver, and they ran the plates and found out the owner of the Jeep had assault and weapons charges. That was probably the most freaked out I've ever been. But I'm so grateful that my friend Anna is aware of her surroundings. What would have happened if we would have gotten out of the car and went into Walmart?